And the way in which this worded, it really gives them carte blanche to search as they please, to enter people's homes, to stop vehicles, to search individuals, because they've put the criteria so low that it's so simple for an officer to come and say, I have suspicion that
you had a reasonable suspicion.
There's somebody who ride a bicycle without a bell. Sorry.
Good night, everyone. Welcome to another episode. Yes, you can see that the discussion has already started and everybody is ready and raring to go. And we're here to talk about the amendments to the police bill. And we're going to find out exactly what is going on there, help you to understand what the amendments were, how they impact us as citizens. And our guest tonight, on my far left, is Kristin Turton. She is the Honorary Secretary for the Bar Association, and we're very happy to have her. On my immediate left, we have David Commissiong, Man of the Year. He is one of my heroes, and I'm very honored to have him here. And our co-host, me and Dwayne, Kristin and Dwayne and Crystal. So, thank you for tuning in, and we give a few minutes for people to share. I say minutes, but really mean seconds, because we really have to get into the meat of the matter tonight. So, you share to the groups and everything. So just give a few minutes for it to build up a bit. In the meantime, I'd like to give a little bit of background as to what you both do.
Well, we are both lawyers. I tend to do all types of law. I don't specialize in any particular area. I don't do a lot of criminal law now. I did when I was a younger lawyer. I did quite a bit of criminal law. I don't do a lot now, and so I would definitely defer to Kristin in that area of the law.
Indeed, I too have a general practice, but I also do a substantial amount of criminal law work, where I represent a number of accused persons. So I'm really involved in criminal defense.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you for, as usual, bringing this to the fore, because a lot of persons may not have recognized that their rights may be potentially infringed upon. And what we're going to try to do tonight, I know that a lot of persons may have some emotions concerning this matter, but we're going to try to get through the information as impartially as possible, because unfortunately we do not have anyone who represents the side of why they are for the amendments. We did make efforts to contact persons, but the numbers that we received, none of them were working or answered. So hopefully some person will be able to log on, either anyone who can reach Berla de Pisa or Hydrographic, because they have been advocating for these amendments so that there can be some balance to the conversation, because at this point, I think we're all very much weary of the amendments that have been proposed. So
maybe, David, if you would like to just start us off and just give a brief of why this is an issue, because some of us may not have read through it. I've read through it, and I would encourage all Barbadians to read through it in particular, some of the concerning parts, and then maybe from a legal perspective, just give a brief overview as to the concerns that you and the Bar Association and many other people have.
Okay, well, we in Barbados have something called the Police Act. And the Police Act basically sets out the duties and powers of the Commissioner of Police and the officers of the Royal Barbados Police Force. And quite recently, our government tabled a bill to amend the Police Act. And if I could just read the title of the bill, it says, "A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Police Act to increase the statutory powers granted to the Commissioner and the Force to protect the life and property of the citizens of Barbados, to ensure peace and public order under the Act with the use of cordons and curfews, and to provide for related matters. So the important parts of that title are to increase the statutory powers granted to the Commissioner and the force. The second important part is with the use of cordons and curfews. So basically what this amendment is doing is giving the police the power to impose cordons, that is to cordon off an area of Barbados or public roads within Barbados, and to impose curfews on geographical areas, communities within Barbados. Now the Act says that in relation to cordons, well, any police officer of the rank of inspector and above can establish a cordon in any area in Barbados for a period of no more than 8 hours at a time, where that cordon is reasonably required to investigate a motor vehicle accident or an incident of serious violence. And where a cordon is established by the police, they can search anyone from within the cordoned off area. Once the police officer has reasonable suspicion that an offense has been committed or is about to be committed. Any offense, no matter how minor or trivial that offense may be. So basically, they establish a cordon, they have the right to search motor vehicles, persons within that cordon area once they have some suspicion. And they also have this strange power to require a person within the cordon area to answer any questions put to them by the police with respect to either the motor vehicle accident or the incident of serious violence. So what it seems...
Without
A warrant.
without the lawyer?
Yes, to answer
So
any
you
question.
take away your rights.
The
to
right
lawyer.
to, the right to remain silent. You apparently you no longer have the right to remain silent. So that's the cordon. Now let's look at the curfew part of it. The curfew, where the Commissioner of Police has received information or intelligence with regard to criminal activity in any area in Barbados, and it appears to him that due to the nature or extent of the criminal activity, that there are reasonable grounds to believe that in the interest of public safety, public order, or for the purpose of preventing or detecting crime, it is necessary to establish a curfew. The Commissioner may contact the Attorney General, and with the written consent of the Attorney General, that curfew may be set up in any area of Barbados. That curfew may last as long as 2 days, and so basically a curfew is set up. The Commissioner of Police and the Attorney General determine the geographical area of the curfew. They also determine the hours of the curfew, because the amended Act does not stipulate any hours. It simply says that these two office holders may determine the geographical area. They may set up the curfew.
And they could set whatever time this curfew starts and ends.
But that's the point. They can determine. So theoretically, it could be a 24-hour curfew. So theoretically, they could impose a curfew on a Barbadian community, and they can decree that for 48 hours no one is to come. People are to be basically imprisoned in their homes or premises, or persons who are away from their homes and premises
Have
when
to
the
come.
curfew.
I see
No,
that.
cannot, may not,
They can't
may
come
not
back.
enter.
But before we move on from that, I think Kristin, when we were talking before, Kristin, you mentioned something about the 2 hours can be extended.
Yes.
Yes,
2 days.
The 2
2
days.
days, sorry.
2 days.
Because the way that the act is worded, it simply requires that the minister authorize it. And what that means is that any authorization only lasts for 2 days, but that doesn't mean that he
You
can
can't
simply,
get
at the end of the first 2, extend that time
And-
for another 2 days.
So the act doesn't provide for finite time.
No.
It could be multiple, indefinite.
Yes, as long as it's 2 days,
At
and
a
then
time,
2
2
days
days
at a time. So essentially every 2 days, theoretically, it would have to be reviewed, but essentially it would be an extension of that time for a further 2 days.
But the only people who review it under this act
Yes.
are the commissioner and the attorney general.
Yes.
There's no one having oversight of this thing.
Exactly. No group. This
And hold on.
Person.
Just to get the story
We're
clear.
just trying to...
Just to get it
I
clear.
just trying to wrap my head around.
Once the curfew is established, the police may then search people within the curfew area.
Whether they're involved or not.
No, once you're within the curfew
Once you're in
area.
the area.
If they set up a curfew in, I don't want to call the name of a community,
So if I don't open my door, what gonna happen?
they can search. Hold on.
Well, we can get
They can
to that.
search persons, any person who is within
Yes.
the curfew area.
Uh-huh.
They can stop and search any motor vehicle that is within the curfew area.
Yes.
Any home or premises that is within the curfew area, provided a police officer has a reasonable suspicion that some offense known to the law, and it doesn't matter how minor or trivial that offense may be, has either been committed or there's some intention to commit such an offense. So basically, the bar has been set so low that you are basically giving the police free rein, carte blanche, to search houses, motor vehicles, and persons within the curfew area.
With no... So if I'm in that area and I say, David, you're my lawyer, I need some help. You can't even come in and do anything for me.
Not unless the police allow you in.
And even if they allow you in and you tell me, don't speak to the police, they have the right to tell me you need to speak to the police.
That has to do with the cordon.
That's a
That
cordon.
doesn't apply to the curfew area.
Alright, let's
That's
go
the
back to
cordon.
court. So in the cordon area, suppose somehow I get a message out to you and I say, look, I'm here in this cordon and a police don't ask me questions and I don't feel like answering. You tell me, well, speak to your lawyer first. You have no rights then as a lawyer coming in there.
According to this act, you are required, if the police asks you any questions about the criminal act or the motor vehicle accident that caused the setting up of the cordon in the first place, under this act, you are required
So-
to answer those
So let me
questions.
ask this question.
Consequence.
Suppose in this...
You're trying to
well,
get
say
to
that-
wriggle into this.
No,
right?
I'm not trying to wriggle. I'm trying to figure out how, because you said, well, the bar is set, and there's if I run in the back of Bristol and we have a fender bender, you're saying that in a situation like that, based on the law, that the policeman can cordon off the area for 8 hours
Yeah, ask anybody.
and ask anybody questions that they want because I ran in the back of Bristol.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Theoretically.
it's not limited
Theoretically.
to you
Mhm.
necessarily. So that, and if a person were to resist that, there are consequences for resisting.
So somebody who is in another gap and that area is considered part of the court, don't even know there's an accident happening, and so they can be, and the police determines a cordon off area, they know.
If the area is cordoned off, you can't leave unless the
Right.
police
Allow
permit
you
you to leave, and you can't enter unless the police permit you to enter. Look, basically,
You're
this
locked down.
thing is about giving the police power, okay? And Barbadians need to understand that we have something called a constitution, right? And
Before we get there,
they want to get there yet. Okay.
people are asking if this has been passed, not yet proclaimed. We want to confirm that.
It's been passed, but it hasn't been proclaimed.
Yet.
No. Yeah.
So we still have time to protest it.
Let's hope it takes as long as the integrity legislation.
Oh, boy. No, but basically it's about giving the police power, right?
See, what be more concerning is all right, use is fine once it's used and rational, but the concern is the high prospect of abuse.
Yes.
Right. Now, just to play devil's advocate, because as I said, the persons who are for the bill are not here to represent. The statement has been made that we can either choose to give the power to the police so that they can protect us because of the upsurges in crime, or we can basically be imprisoned by the criminals who have been increasing their activity as of recently. And either way, we're prisoners, but at least the police have our best interests at heart.
Listen, my problem with this is that you are giving too much power to these two office holders. Now, under our present constitutional arrangements, we do have provision for this kind of power to be granted in specific circumstances.
Right.
Under our current constitutional arrangements, these kinds of powers can be granted where there is a period of public emergency. That's, when there's a serious emergency in the country. Including just what we read here. I read here about where there's information with regard to criminal activity in any area of Barbados. That can trigger a period of public emergency. But for that period of public emergency to come into effect, the Houses of Parliament, the House of Assembly and the Senate, first have to vote on it by a 2/3 majority of their members. Or the Governor General can proclaim it for a period of 1 month, and thereafter the House of Assembly has to step in to confirm the Governor General's proclamation of such a period of public emergency. So under our present constitutional arrangements, if these kinds of scenarios are to come into effect, it means that the political representatives of the people, elected by the people of Barbados, have to think about it, have to discuss it, and have to vote upon it. That's my problem. That
it takes away that democratic right, because you're taking away the powers of the political candidates, because you're saying in a situation like that, you're removing their powers. So under the Constitution, the powers are granted to them. We as the people have elected our cabinet, but you're now saying that under the Constitution, with this act, you're removing their powers.
Yes, and you're placing
to
it,
represent us.
and you're placing it in the hands of the Commissioner of Police,
which we did not elect.
And what is so ironic is just 24. This thing was passed by the Senate yesterday, right? 24 hours before then, DLP members of Parliament were in Parliament, publicly proclaiming to all Barbados that they have evidence that a Commissioner of Police has abused powers that he possesses to institute wiretapping of phones of Barbadian citizens.
Yes.
So here you are complaining about a Commissioner of Police abusing power that he has, and at the same time you want to go and put this enormous power in the hands of a Commissioner of Police and the Attorney General.
And the potential for
of course,
abuse.
great potential for abuse. And look, these curfews are not going to be imposed on the middle class and upper middle class areas. It's not going. Where you live, it's not going to happen. These curfews, they are going to target working class communities, and they're going to take away these people's rights. They're going to let me not be so dogmatic. Let me not be so. In all likelihood,
there is a significant risk.
In all likelihood,
it is very likely.
Well, Kristin, before we were, I always like these shows because you get you feeling just before we start, so we try to pull them up. But Kristin, you were mentioning, you were talking about, you started to address about social communities, and we obviously don't want to mention any, by name,
Mhm.
but you want to expand on the social community issue?
Look, there is a significant risk to persons, particularly from the lower socioeconomic backgrounds, because of the fact that, in general, you will find that those are the persons who are ordinarily already targeted by the police. Those are the areas that you will find the police doing patrols in. Those are the types of persons that you will find that they will expect will be involved in that type of activity. And as a result, what you can find once they have these powers to designate particular areas is that the areas that the police are familiar with, that they believe people who commit crimes normally reside in, those are the areas that are going to be targeted. One of the primary challenges, of course, is that just because you live in that area does not mean that you're involved in criminal activity. You may be the person who isn't involved in criminal activity, and there might be 3 or 4 other people around you who are. But you have to suffer in your home for 2 days because of it. But one of the risks that I also consider is important is there is no provision for compensation relative to losses that the people in that area will incur, because we have to also recall the curfew is not limited. Well, first of all, it's not limited to households. It's limited. It also includes the closure of a business or the ending of a social activity, a social gathering. So could you imagine you have a business in an area, you have a little shop in this particular area, and you are told that you have to close your business. Is there going to be compensation for the owner of that business relative to the sales that that person could have had?
Let's stick with the communities again, because one of the things that concerned me, I picked out 3 points. One of the things that concerned me was this thing where it says, just make sure I read it correctly, or thought to be in the process of committing.
Yeah, they have a reasonable suspicion that an offense is about to be committed.
So
you don't even have to have an actual offense.
So effectively, you're turning a policeman into a judge and jury, effectively.
I might read it.
And how, as you are attorneys, how do you walk down the street and you look and to determine that a crime can be committed?
Okay, hold on. That concept of a police officer having reasonable suspicion that a crime has been committed or is about to be committed, that's not a strange notion, right?
Not unusual?
No. But usually it is reasonable suspicion that an arrestable offense has been committed or some serious offense to trigger powers of search and powers of arrest. Usually to trigger the power of a police officer to arrest and to search, it can be on reasonable suspicion of a serious offense having been committed or about to be committed. Okay? A breach of the peace, some act of violence and so forth. But the way this is worded, it doesn't talk about an arrestable offense or a serious offense or a breach of the peace or a felony. It says any offense. You know what any offense means? If I do not file my income tax return on time, that is an offense. If I ride a bicycle and it doesn't have a bell as required by the Road Traffic Act, that is an offense. If I intend to park my car in an area where no parking is allowed, that is an offense. If I live in a National Housing Corporation housing area and somebody alleges that I intend to obstruct the NHC officer from coming to inspect my premises, that is an offense under the Housing Act. So this is the you see, when you write legislation in that way, when you say police, we can search you, we can stop your vehicle and search your vehicle, we can enter your premises and search your premises. Once a police officer has reasonable suspicion that any offense either has been committed or is intended to be committed basically you are sending a message to the police force. Once we have declared a curfew in this area, you are at liberty to search everybody, any house, go and exercise your powers. That's the message that's
and it doesn't have to even be related at all to the original offense.
No, it's any
that they are concerned about that gave rise to the curfew in the first place. And that certainly makes no sense. If you're saying that it is so unnecessary because this extremely serious offense is likely to be committed, because it doesn't have to be committed, why do you then have powers to address things that are not related to that offense?
Can they lock down communities on election day as well? Is that any exclusion in the act?
No, this is
any day, anytime.
Any day.
Once the reasonable suspicion exists, that is it. Once the Commissioner of Police has made that determination and has been able to convince the Attorney General, that is it. There's no limitation on
that
time.
was actually one of the questions that someone asked. If this ties back into the upcoming elections.
But see, y'all are asking questions, legitimate questions, that should have been asked of this bill before it was enacted. In other words, if you as a government, you are coming with a bill that has significant implications for the constitutionally guaranteed rights of the Barbadian people, surely you have a responsibility to put that bill through some process of national discussion and consultation so that these kinds of questions can be asked and hopefully answered. None of that was done.
I'd like to go back, because you were talking about the constitutional law earlier before we cut you off, because from my understanding, if a bill contravenes what is in the Constitution, it is deemed illegal and therefore cannot be enacted. If we can prove that this bill or the amendments that have been made will contravene persons' constitutional rights, what would then be the next step?
Well, a government can amend. You can bring a law that amends the Constitution or that permits things that are currently against the constitutional provisions, but you must say that in the bill. You must say this is a bill that is intended to abrogate or amend the Constitution, and then you must have the requisite majority, 2/3 majority vote in the Parliament. That didn't obtain with this bill. Nobody said this was a bill to amend the Constitution, and it certainly did not have a 2/3 majority vote in the Senate, because just about all of the independent senators opposed it, and the opposition senators opposed it as well. So yes, if it is found that this bill, it's an act now, it's no longer a bill, it has been enacted, it's now an act, but this act contains provisions that abrogate sections of the Constitution. A lawyer can go to court. You can ask the Supreme Court. You can take a constitutional action before the Supreme Court of Barbados, and it can be struck down.
So you're doing that?
I will. Well, as a lawyer, I am about 90% sure that this act is unconstitutional. About 90% sure. But as a lawyer, I have to go and do the research.
Right.
I have to go and do, and if I satisfy myself that this act is unconstitutional, yes, I would be prepared to go to court.
But I can flip it now, because I have a pet peeve with the organizations in Barbados. I call them the Silent Land organizations. And the Bar Association is not immune from my categorization. I would say, under these weeks, I've noticed that the Bar Association has been very more proactive, very in events like this. In the past, I have not seen that from the Bar Association or any other organizations in Barbados. So I think David has a lot on his plate in terms of some other interesting things that he has done. In my mind, the Bar Association should be front and center with this. Why would I be incorrect in that statement?
I don't know you would be incorrect. The bar does have a role to to take every possible step that it can to uphold law and order. That is part of its mandate. And it is not unreasonable to expect the bar to be very active in fighting this cause. That may or may not include instituting proceedings to have it struck down, as the bar has actually done relative to other pieces of legislation. So there is a role for the bar to do that, but obviously we would need, the council itself would need a mandate from its members to take that particular step in respect of this particular piece of legislation.
Have you all started that process?
No, that has not yet been done. We would need to have a special general meeting at which we would be authorized to take that particular step. Because obviously, in taking any step, the bar, of course, might be exposing itself to costs and so on. So a responsible and well thought out decision has to be made. And on the last occasion that we looked at legislation that we didn't agree with or that we thought was unconstitutional, we actually appointed a body of attorneys to evaluate it and to conduct the same type of research that Mr. Commissiong spoke about. Because you may disagree with legislation, but it may not necessarily be unconstitutional. It may affect people's rights, but it as a whole may not be unconstitutional. There may, for example, be one or two provisions. So before a decision can be made about whether or not an action is to be brought, proper research has to be done. And that's really the approach that we've taken.
What I would suggest to the Bar Association to on a matter of significance like this, because obviously the concern is not the use of powers, the concern is obviously the abuse of powers.
Yes.
And going back to what David said, you had just 24 hours ago, someone actually, the current administration making an allegation that there was abuse of powers. Whether it's true or not, that was their allegation.
Yes.
I would suggest in a scenario like this that we have other, what I call the silent exam organizations, get them to have a voice. And you can contact ICAP, the HTA, the BPSA, the unions, the bars manufacturers, all of them, and co-join in getting their opinion on this to bring a voice to it. Because something as critical as this nature is not strictly related to the legal profession. This affects, is a national issue, and it affects 285,000 people. So, you can do the work, but feel free to reach out to them, and hopefully they will find a voice on matters like this, because my belief is that they like to remain mute, be concerned but remain mute in matters like this. And I don't think this is time for a lot of things that we should be remaining mute on.
I think that is actually how most Barbadians are.
Correct.
Where we sit in our own groups, our individual groups, and complain about the things that we disagree with, but we're not necessarily prepared to step out and make those concerns publicly known. What I'm sure people have observed is that social media has made people a lot more comfortable with expressing their opinions. And you will find that people who engage heavily in social media are more likely to express an opinion openly about whether they agree or disagree with things of this nature. So it's really a matter for our country and our people to move forward and to move to the point where we are collectively willing to take steps to address situations like this and to let our displeasure be known. I have heard a number of different persons express their concerns about this from different organizations as well. And it is hoped that opportunities like this for people to be informed about what the bill has the potential to do might give rise to more people expressing their views. One other concern that I think people have, though, is people have a difficulty in being able to see themselves as a victim under legislation like this. So what you would find is persons who are proponents of this bill will talk about the criminals. Do you want to be subject to the criminals? But what if you are treated like the same criminals that you're supposed to be afraid of? You believe somehow that you could never fall into that category. But you can, all of us can, because it applies to everyone. It does not just say people from this particular community or people with this particular mode of employment, or people who have previously committed offenses and cannot obtain a police certificate of character. It doesn't say that. So because it applies to everyone, I think the only way for the country to accept that something has to be done about this is when people recognize that it affects everyone and it has the capacity to do that.
Well, we have a ton of questions coming, as you can appreciate.
I just have one question before we get to, because there are a lot of questions. I would have noted in, I think it was The Nation, where it was stated that the bar was not contacted before.
That is
this was
correct.
done, and you did not have any involvement.
No.
Is it the norm for the bar to get involved before amendments are made?
I can indicate there have been occasions on which we have been contacted. Most recently, we were contacted in relation to the amendments to the Bail Act, and we made our position very clear to the Office of the Attorney General, and ultimately that position would have been sent to our members, and somehow that would have ended up in the press. And shortly after that was published in the press, the Attorney General indicated that they were not proceeding with that particular bill at this time because it's still under review.
Right.
Now, I cannot say whether that is the reason why we were not contacted relative to this one,
Right.
but it is something which ought to happen always. It is my fundamental belief, and I think that that is a belief held by the majority of members of the bar, that given our particular position in society and our mandate by virtue of legislation, that we should be contacted relative to all pieces of legislation, not just those that may, for example, affect us directly, such as an amendment to the Legal Profession Act, but all pieces of legislation, particularly those that affect the public in this type of way, ought to be sent to us for review and comment. That does not mean that the powers that we have to agree with our comments, but they should at least solicit them, so that then if there are issues, for example, you have raised issues as an individual, I can raise issues as an individual, and if those issues are raised, then at least perhaps the legislation doesn't have to be shelved, it might just have to be adjusted to address those issues.
Well, one of the things that this particular group, the Social Accountability and Education Group, was formed on, and is the primary principle, is on the principles of governance, of good governance, which involves transparency, accountability, predictability, and more importantly, participation. Because you mentioned it previously, we had the same thing with Cahill. We had potentially economic and environmental disaster, and it was just thrust upon us, no town hall meetings, and this seems to be the modus operandi. But under a good governance scenario, something like this should have been involved at least the stakeholders who are knowledgeable in these matters. I wouldn't expect them to contact me because I'm an accountant and I don't really know.
Excuse me.
Sorry?
Not just the stakeholders, not just the experts. We operate something called a democracy. It's not a technocracy. It's not a form of corporatism. It's not a government simply based on experts. Ordinary people have, in a democracy, ordinary people who are not experts, but who live the reality, have just as much a right to be consulted and to have their opinion registered, to ask questions, and to make their views known.
Well, I agree with you 1,000%. But what my point was that I was saying at least.
Yeah, but I'm correcting that because I don't want that idea to go out there. That is only experts.
Because everything that we say in our group, we always reference the 285,000.
The highest office in the land is the office of citizen. The highest office in the land. And the rights of a citizen need to be taken very, very seriously.
Well, let's get to
The questions.
Yeah, Mr. Anthony Trotman. Said, what about the argument raised by Senator DePisa that most of the powers contained in the new act are contained in other acts, and this just is bringing them under one umbrella?
It's not true. It's not true. As we said, right now in Barbados, the only way curfews can be imposed is under some state of public emergency. So this is a totally new departure to put the power to impose curfews in the hands of the Commissioner of Police and the Attorney General. Similarly, secondly, in Barbados generally, the power to enter somebody's home and to search it is done under search warrant.
Correct.
That is granted by a judicial officer. Section 17 of our Constitution says, except with his own consent, no person shall be subjected to the search of his person or his property or the entry by others on his premises. Of course, there are exceptions to that. So yes, if a police officer believes that a breach of the peace is going to take place in your home, then there are exceptional circumstances. But this idea that simply on the basis of an officer having reasonable suspicion that any offense, no matter how minor or trivial, has been committed or is intended to be committed, that's a new departure.
Yeah.
That's a new departure in our law. Basically, this is about giving the police new powers to target a particular community or communities, to lock down those communities, and to search homes, premises, motor cars, human beings within those communities. That is what this is about. So let's not try to fool ourselves. Let's not deal with fantasy. That is what this is about, and it's not going to be about upper middle class communities. It is going to be the people who are going to be targeted by this kind of overwhelming police power are going to be working class poor Barbadians.
But that has the potential to agitate the situation, whatever it is, even more.
And that leads into another question asked by Jason Lewis. He wants to know what happens if his boss fires him because he's in a cordoned off area and can't get to work.
Well, that's the point. That's the point. The legislation makes no provision for the consequences that persons who reside in these areas will experience, whether that be, as he says, in terms of losing his employment, in terms of, yes, there are many problems that could arise in that situation. Suppose someone fell ill and they were required to stay there. There is no provision.
So in effect,
you would still need the police to say, yes, you can leave. And another challenge that I have with it is in terms of the curfew. It says that it applies to a particular area. But obviously you have multiple people in that area with different challenges. So, for example, if they determine that it is a 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. curfew, suppose you have someone that does the graveyard shift at a gas station.
Correct.
Take into consideration that right now, judicial officers have the power to impose curfews, particularly on persons who are on bail. And when they do that, they have to take into consideration, for example, the person's employment. So, as a condition of bail, you may be granted bail but told, we're imposing a curfew on you. You have to be in your home from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. Routinely, I go to court and a person says, but, well, I don't finish work until 7 o'clock, or I just was asked to do another shift. And the court will vary the curfew to take that into consideration so that then you can arrive, you would have to stay home from 9 p.m. to, let's say, 5:30 a.m.
Right.
That can be done on an individual basis when you're looking at one person who is charged with an offense. How is it that you're able to look at an entire area that could have 100 people
thousands of people.
And you have there is no requirement upon you to take into consideration the idiosyncrasies of those persons' lives?
Yeah.
Not to mention those who are in the area, but there is actually no suspicion at all that they are involved in any activity.
Let me add this here, because just to give you a better sense of the intent behind this legislation, it is also saying that when the police impose that curfew on the community, anyone found guilty of using abusive or insulting language to any police officer within that community is liable on conviction by a court of summary jurisdiction, that is a magistrate's court, to a fine of $10,000 or to imprisonment for a term of 3 years or to both. So it is actually sending a message, look, when we come and lock down your community, do not interfere with these police officers, because even if you insult one of them or abuse them verbally in any way, the penalty has now been increased. Now the penalty under the law before this change was a maximum fine of $1,000 and a maximum sentence of 12 months in prison. So you've gone from $1,000 to $10,000 and from a maximum of 1 year to 3 years. So the intent is clear. When we come and lock down your community, don't mess with us.
But this is emphasized by the fact that they have increased. You see, there was always a penalty imposed for assaulting, obstructing, resisting, using abusive language to a police officer. But as Mr. Commissiong pointed out, it was $1,000 or 12 months in prison. They've increased that in general terms to 2 years in prison or a $5,000 fine or both. What I'm saying is this. The general power is $5,000 or 2 years in prison if you do that anywhere in Barbados. But if you're in a curfew area, it's $10,000 or 3 years in prison. So it's making a person who does that in that area, who may actually not be a criminal at all, they might not have been engaged in any criminal activity. But if they resist and say, I need to go to work, I cannot stay in here, right? They can be subject to a more serious penalty than someone who, for example, resists arrest when the police are entitled to arrest that person for having committed an offense. And think about that carefully.
The question I have, does this no go on their record?
If the sentence is imprisonment, if the sentence is imprisonment, if the sentence is a fine, then yes. Of course, it should be borne in mind that all of these are maximum penalties. It doesn't mean that a court could not impose another type of penalty like a bond to keep the peace or community service or probation, things which don't create a criminal record once the court declares that. But the point is that people are at risk of that taking place.
And then your police certificate of character now is impacted.
Exactly. Your ability to travel perhaps to America would be impacted.
And as you pointed out, many times is going to be in communities and areas very likely who can't afford the fine. So very likely they will just end up in prison.
Correct.
Yes, but we stress these are maximum.
Maximum.
But the point is, there's a particular intent that is coming through.
Correct.
You see, it doesn't mean that a magistrate would necessarily simply fall in line.
Yes.
But the legislators are manifesting a certain intent behind this legislation.
I have one, because I want to get to how this act compares to other areas.
Yeah, because people are asking Ron Lane, just a modification, he's asking if there are any other countries.
But before we I want to clear off one thing, because that one is going to be a whole different one. This is the last quick one. When we got back to the point where you said you had to, this is with the Bar Association, but engaging your members, and Carlos Richard is asking, has that meeting been organized? What are you waiting for?
Well, it hasn't been organized. Ultimately, I suppose there was some hope that with the overall pressure that was brought to bear from the public, that there might not be a need, as we had indicated in terms of the Bail Act. We never had a special general meeting. We didn't need to, because once we made our position clear and the public appeared to be more in support of a position that did not support that piece of legislation, there was no further progress with it. We had to wait, of course, to see if it was passed or if there was going to be a pulling back, essentially, of it, and that has not taken place at this time. Our president is out of the jurisdiction until next week, and we will have a meeting and take certain steps to determine what the bar's position as a whole will be.
Let me fill in some blanks here,
Sure.
and which would be helpful to the bar as well. this bill went before.
Sorry, someone wrote.
This bill went before the House of Assembly.
Somebody wrote in a comment here that was actually quick.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
This bill went before the House of Assembly. Virtually nobody in Barbados knew anything about this bill.
Exactly.
The members of Parliament in the House of Assembly did not, to the best of my knowledge, make any great protest about this. In fact, I remember seeing something on this debate where Dale Marshall was saying too little too late. Right?
Yes, that was-
Too little, that was what was too little too late. In other words, I heard no protests coming from neither government or opposition MPs. Now, when it got to the Senate, an independent senator contacted me and shared the bill with me because he wanted to get my opinion on it.
So just
That's when it came to me.
That went through Parliament?
Yes, it went through the House of Assembly. It was passed by the House of Assembly. When it got to the Senate, an independent senator brought it to my attention. This is when it first came to my attention in any serious way. When I read this thing, I said, but this is fundamentally wrong. How could you be passing something like this without consulting the Barbadian people? I then took it upon myself to do a press release, which I sent to all of the independent senators, the opposition senators, the newspapers, making the point that this is wrong, that the Senate must not enact this, that the people of Barbados and the and civil society organizations like the Bar Association must be permitted an opportunity to be consulted, to have a say on this. And to their credit, virtually every one of the independent senators did their duty and demonstrated the value of having a cohort of non-partisan legislators in our parliament. And they all made that point, that this should not be enacted, that there's been no proper public consultation on it, and it needs to go through that kind of process. So it is at that stage now that it becomes known to the Bar Association. And so all of this is very recent. This is just within the last few days, you see? But so something is fundamentally wrong where a government could believe that it could pass a bill like this that has such implications for the fundamental rights of our people, basically in secrecy, but without any public consultation. So I was hoping, because I addressed a release to all of the government senators prior to the debate, prior to yesterday's debate. I sent all of them a release, all of the government senators, imploring them to do the right thing, not to pass this act, to send it back to the House of Assembly for further consultation. Of course, that didn't happen.
I'll just tell you what I laughed at. The Carlos Richards again wrote, he says, does Barbados have enough police officers to protect themselves if the criminals decide to reject the curfew?
I suppose.
Seriously.
and do they have enough police to actually enforce the curfew?
Well, I see it. I wouldn't underestimate our police in that way. I think, my concern is just the other way. My concern is the other way. My concern is really with the people of the innocent people of working class communities. That's where my concern lies. And yes, I think our police can deploy a lot of power, and I think our police are very capable of locking down working class communities in Barbados.
Before we get into the next question, a statement from Colin Best of Solutions Barbados. He was lamenting the disappointment he had with the lack of public consultation via town halls, civic organization, communication with the public before the introduction. So people are echoing the same sentiment. And another comment that came in was that it feels as though this was trying to be sit under the radar amidst everything else that is going on, and it is that you're trying to slip a fast one. So the next question that came in was related to, are there any other countries that have anything like this? And if there are, how do they manage, how are their citizens treated? Is there any comparison that we can have at all?
We've seen it happening in Jamaica now, where they have imposed curfews on Montego Bay, parish of St. James. But they have done so in a situation of virtual civil war. Massive crime, massive number of murders, criminals opening fire on funeral processions and so forth, right? So there is this kind. You see, I am getting the impression, at this stage it's just speculation, I don't know for sure, but I would not be surprised if what we see happening in Barbados is part of some campaign that has been agreed upon by commissioners of police and attorney generals from across the Caribbean, maybe with some prodding and some organizing from outside of our region. That they seem to be taking the Caribbean into a phase of a kind of police state kind of phase. And we have to be very, very careful about this because, do you all remember that there used to be an organization called Freedom House? And every year Freedom House used to rank all of the countries in the world in terms of the degree of freedom the nation had. And Barbados used to be number one in the world. Barbados had an international reputation as being the freest country in the world. For many years it was said that Barbados was the freest country. So we have to be very careful about any attempts to erode our democratic rights and freedoms. We are not Jamaica. We don't have the kind of problems that Jamaica have, and if we do the right thing, hopefully we will never reach to that stage. So don't make arrangements for Barbados based on a Jamaican social reality. We Barbadian people, we must insist on being a free people, a people who enjoy social liberties, and we must have the spirit that says we must be on guard against any unreasonable infringement on our rights and liberties.
Well, this brings us into comparing to the other territories. I'm aware of the word Zosa in the Jamaica situation. Can any of you know a bit more about that, and how does it compare to what legislation is here? If any of you know that,
I'm not familiar. I'm not familiar.
But that's what they're doing. But do you know any other territories, whether it be any Caribbean or extra-regional?
I can't.
Well, I can't say specifically in terms of legislation, but I do know that in the United States of America, of course, there were a few challenges with this, and one of the concerns is that it would have been stop and search, which is similar to what has been actually enacted by this bill. And the challenge is the constant targeting, for example, of black people in those jurisdictions. And we've seen the relationship between the citizen and the police starting to fray in those jurisdictions, and there's a realistic fear that that's something that could happen here, particularly where there is that type of targeting. And we know that, for example, certain types of vehicles may not be stopped. Certain people who have a certain appearance, even though we are all black, we also know that dress is normally a signifier of what social class you belong to. And persons can be targeted based on their dress, based on their speech, if they're in close enough proximity to the police. And that is something that you can find a lot of. And the type of impact that has had a lot of jurisdiction with, as you've seen, a lot of marches, there have been virtual riots in those jurisdictions because of that targeting. That's a risk that we run. Because if, let's say, these powers are abused in the way that we fear that it will be, what prevents those persons who live in those communities from becoming agitated in that sense, and then agitating for their rights in a way which places the entire society in harm's way.
Which is the point I was raising a little earlier with
Mhm.
David. Is there any potential, because I'm not laying on any aspiration on any government or party, is there any potential that this could be taken to the political level? It could be done from a political side? Because where's the, who has the power in this? The powers in the...
I don't think it would be wise for us to speculate, because it would just be wild speculation on our part.
Because that's what's the kind of concerns coming through inside.
Well, yeah, I could understand concerns, yes, because we have a very important general election looming and all of that. But honestly, for us to express opinions on that would be nothing more than idle speculation. You see. So even if you have it in the back of your mind, I don't think it would be right for us to, to come out and speak in those terms.
The question I have, because regardless of whether the solution we agree with it or not, the problem still is there, according to the persons who put this forward, that we have increasing levels of crime and something needs to be done.
Yeah, but Kristin,
What modifications would you recommend?
Yeah, but before you even get to modifications, right? If there are people in our society, if there are people like Mr. Adrian Barfitt and Mr. Frundell Stewart and their political colleagues who feel that the crime situation in Barbados is so severe that these kinds of impositions on the rights and liberties of the Barbadian people are required, then the correct thing for them to do is to come to us, the Barbadian people, and to make the case, to tell us why they feel we should be willing to give up our rights. And so that we could respond, we could ask for clarification, we could ask for further information, we could question them, we could raise questions about the technical details and the practicalities of what they are proposing, and we could have a mature national conversation. In fact, that is how a democracy is supposed to function. But they haven't done that. They have gotten together by themselves, concocted this thing by themselves, and simply rushed it through Parliament without even consulting a relevant body like the Barbados Bar Association. So this is what is wrong. It should not be for us. It should not be for us to justify why we should continue to enjoy our constitutionally guaranteed rights and liberties. It should be for those persons who are proposing to take them away or to impinge upon them in some way, to come and make the case to us and convince us. You see, and this is the problem.
I would say this show has presented me and Crystal the biggest challenge, because when we do shows, we like to bring both sides of an argument.
Right.
And this has been a challenge for me, because I am trying to understand
their side,
their
their
side.
logic,
And I'm hoping that maybe from your end, you can actually see why they went this route.
Well,
Because we've Crystal and I,
we've tried.
we don't know how to do it.
Okay, the only thing that I can honestly think of is that based on reports, it appears that there is an upsurge, not in crime, but in crime with the use of firearms, which are particularly serious and concerning crimes. It has also been reported that because of the nature of the crimes, the nature of, for example, certain gangs and so on that there are within the jurisdiction, as they have everywhere, that witnesses are reluctant to come forward. So that because there are those limitations, the fear is that unless the police themselves are able to find these things, for example, unless they're able to cordon off areas to find those firearms, unless they're able to stop and search people in order to do that and to get the persons who are involved in that activity somehow charged and remanded, that the country will continue to suffer in relation to these types of offenses. And that's the concern. You see, there's the provision for them to require people to speak in a particular area when you cordon off the area. That very well might not be targeted at accused persons at all. It may be targeted to address those witnesses who are refusing to come forward because they're afraid. They're afraid for themselves. So it's targeting them as well to see if there's a way to compel them to say what they have seen and therefore to assist the police in solving the case. So that is the perspective that I believe they're looking at it from. And I admire the perspective. I understand what they want. I understand the need to address it. I just do not agree that this is the way to address it. I also do not agree that this is an effective way of addressing it. Because, for example, let's say you question that person in that area. Okay? They give you a statement in the area. How are you going to compel them to give evidence?
Yeah.
What if they get on the stand and say, I can't remember?
Mm-hmm.
I may have been mistaken at that time. You understand? There are ways to get around that.
Yeah.
Secondly, the risk to the society is much greater if these things are abused than the potential benefit. And we are forgetting one very important thing. The police come in after the fact. After an offense has been committed or after somebody has decided to commit an offense. Because for you to say that you have reasonable suspicion that an offense may be committed, someone must have decided to commit it already. Mm-hmm. So that you're coming in after the fact. The way to address these problems is to address the root causes of crime. Period. Coming in after doesn't stop people from committing offenses. You have to get to the root cause in terms of what motivates people to commit crimes, and you have to do what the Commissioner of Police was talking about over a year ago. How are they getting the guns into the country?
That's the way they said, through the port. So he just asked, are you going to cordon off the port for 2 days?
Well, that's the thing.
And the reason they find
or every day.
There's some very funny comments.
Yeah.
So I can't share all of them.
Yes, that's a significant concern, so that we look to do these things which directly take away from our rights, and we are comfortable with doing that because we feel they're not our rights that are being infringed. It's somebody else who really doesn't deserve to have them.
Well, I will argue the case that with David and you, that it doesn't necessarily mean that it will only stay in that neighborhood, because it can go.
I agree.
And then it will hit home, because if we send the message out there, that's only then the person who lives in the upper that ain't affect me.
Exactly. But that's my point from before.
But
The
it shouldn't
thought
be thinking like that.
the thought process of people.
But you said
You have to
people in
remember.
Barbados- Yeah, sorry.
Every person, fundamentally, people think about themselves
Yes.
first,
Correct.
and then other people second. So when you think about yourself, I'm middle class, they're not coming to my house.
Mm-hmm.
Those criminals, I need to stop them from breaking into my home. Those criminals, they don't deserve rights. They don't deserve anything. That's what they say all the time until, let's say, their child finds themselves in that
But
situation.
not only that, Kristin.
Right? It's only when it hits home that they think
But it's
about
not.
others.
It's not only that, Kristin. You start on a slippery slope,
Very.
right? Once you start subverting people's human and civil rights, so you say, okay, it's not going to affect me. It's that class of lower class people.
Exactly.
It's not, but what you have started, you put a process in train, and it's not going to stop there. Let me remind you all of something. 2 years ago, this same administration went to Parliament and enacted something called the Immigration Biometrics Regulations. Never informed the Barbadian people. No consultation with the Barbadian people. We just woke up one day and heard a release from the chief immigration officer that in 3 months' time, the government of Barbados is going to be imposing the fingerprinting of all citizens of Barbados who leave the country and return to the country under the immigration biometrics regulations. When I read that, what's that? So I went searching frantically for it. I never heard about this thing before. And I eventually found it. This thing had already gone through the House of Assembly and the Senate and had been enacted. But when I did my research, I realized not only was it improperly enacted, but it was also unconstitutional, because it was saying that in certain circumstances, a citizen of Barbados who refused to give his fingerprints at the airport could be denied re-entry into his own country. But the point is the mentality. The point is the mentality. Here you have a political administration, and I would say a political class, because I wouldn't even limit it just to them. It's a way of thinking that we are the rulers, we are the elite, we are the in-group, we think for them, we act for them, so we don't even have to consult them. We could purport to take away their right to even return to their own country without consulting them, without forewarning them. They just wake up one day and it's before them as a fait accompli. Now this is wrong. So I am saying to the Barbadian people, look, that kind of mentality is a holdover from that old slave and colonial society that we had, where you had this very elitist society with a ruling master class that imposed edicts from on high. That's a holdover from that past. And we must not permit that to continue. Barbados is supposed to be a democratic society, and we must not permit our people that we elect, who are supposed to be our servants, to believe that they don't have to consult us, even on things that are fundamental to our interests and liberties. And so I want to really urge Barbadians, let this be a wake-up call for us. We are not going to take this anymore. We must insist any political administration, B, D, P, whatever,
42 parties now.
Whatever, that this is a democracy. You consult us. We are there to be consulted.
That's where governance comes in. Government organization.
Very important.
What offends me most about this is you talked about root cause, but if this was even had the potential, which we already know it will be used, there's reasonable suspicion about how guns get into this country, who finances the drugs and everything else. And it is the persons who are the working class and the working poor in Barbados, they're at the bottom end of responsibility as far as them concerned, and yet they bear the brunt of the punishment whenever it has to be meted out. Nobody goes after, when you see two little boys running and shooting at the place and they're arrested, nobody goes after the person who supplied them with the guns. Nobody goes after the person who financed that person. Nobody goes after the person who made sure that they got into the country to begin with. Because they're not flying in here by invisible jet. Somebody allows it to happen. And if I get persons giving me hints as to who it is, I'm sure that the persons in power have more than reasonable suspicion as to who these persons are. Yet something like this would never be used to go after the real root cause of the violence that's happening in the country to begin with. But they're going to use something like this to infringe on the rights of poor people even more than they have before.
Well, yes, I understand your point, and it's a reasonable one to make, certainly. But the act itself would allow them to go after those persons.
Not going to do it though.
Well, I'm simply saying that it doesn't prevent them from doing it, and it empowers them to do it. So it would capture those persons as well. It's just the risk appears to be greater in relation to communities.
Yeah.
Just to add to Crystal's point, without digressing, one of the things I always say in Barbados, and in most parts of the world, I say, we're quick to lock up the choke and raw people,
Yeah.
but the boardroom bandits continue to practice the art of the steal.
Yes.
And we allow that in all societies. In Barbados,
It
anywhere.
definitely happens.
Because people hide behind the corporate shield
Mhm.
and they use the legal system to act in a moral and unethical manner.
Mm.
And we more persecute the guy who stole the 2 cans of corned beef
Yep.
than the fellow who carried all the shareholder money.
That's a good point, and it's true. That is ideally that's what happens. People who, for example, routinely persons are charged with stealing substantial amounts of money, and they
Hush, hush.
well no, you go through a process, but they hardly ever spend time in prison. But the person who goes and steals, as you say, corned beef or tuna, routinely is sent to prison for 3 months or 9 months because when all they have said is that I couldn't afford to buy it, so I stole it. I was hungry.
Well, you know,
But what that comes from actually is a problem that we as a society have. It comes through whenever there's sentencing. A person who comes from a good background, who commits an offense, will always be treated better and will hardly
quote unquote.
that's what I'm saying. That's a quote unquote
Yeah,
good
She added up.
background. Because what will happen is when you look at that person's background, look at their family life, look at where they went to school, where they're working, yet they stole $1 million. And you will look at them and you'll say, but you can't send them to prison. Look at who they'll be with. Right? That's the perspective that you have, and that the recommendations that come through in relation to those persons is that, oh, but they're unlikely to commit this type of offense again because they have good support, right? Contrast that now with the person that comes from a poor socioeconomic background, who doesn't have any CXCs, who has been involved in this type of activity for a very long time, probably because that was the main opportunity available to them, and they don't have a stable household, which is probably how they ended up in this position in the first place. And the court will say, but you see, because he doesn't have stability behind him, he's likely to commit offenses like this again. So what we need to do is to send him to prison. And that's a perspective issue. That's a societal perspective. And unless we change that perspective and look at how we can really rehabilitate and address, as I said, the root causes of crime, we will continue to have this
But
problem.
you and Crystal too young for this, but Beretta had David would know this one. Beretta used to have a thing said, if you can't do the time, don't do the crime. So that goes to the same person that took $1 million in cash. If you can't do the time, don't do the crime.
Yeah, and what Crystal is saying, he will not be called upon to do
Exactly.
it.
He will not. He will be paid.
But there's the
That'll be the end
there's
of
the other issue of corrupt police officers, corruption within the police force. In fact, even in relation to this issue of illegal firearms, because as we know, in recent months, a senior police officer has been charged with that kind of offense. But so the question, there are these allegations about corruption within the police force, and in fact, it would be a very peculiar police force. Barbados would have a very peculiar police force if there were no corrupt police officers within our force. The question, so we can take it as a given that there is corruption within the police force. The question is, do we have a proper mechanism in Barbados for policing our police, for investigating our police? And I would say no. I would say, admittedly, under this current commissioner, Mr. Griffith, I have seen evidence of this commissioner actually taking action against offending police officers.
That's correct.
So
we're going in a positive direction.
yeah, well, yes.
But he's one person.
Yeah, but the point is, can we feel satisfied that we have a proper system in Barbados for policing and investigating the police? I think not.
It shouldn't depend
I
on the
think
person.
not. There are far too many instances, in fact. Yeah. We rely upon the police to, in a sense, investigate themselves, the officer of professional responsibility, and so forth. It doesn't work. It really doesn't work. So that's another issue that we need to address. That's the kind of white elephant in the room.
We actually coming up to, it's almost been an hour and a half.
Let's about two more videos to ask. Douglas Trotman had asked
if the Governor General can send this back to be looked at, and I believe a statement was made on Barbados Today, their news report, where they are going to consider it.
Say that again.
I believe it was Gabriel Rapid that made a statement that they would consider. It's not ruled out. I think those are the words he said. It would not be ruled out to have it reviewed.
Because I think in this case, Governor General Sam.
Yes.
So she'd be very au fait with these matters. So if if the Bar Association wrote, or I don't know how it works, but it has to be proclaimed by the Governor General, correct?
That's correct.
Right. So the Governor General is very au fait with these matters.
No, but I would think that this is the effect of the independent senators. The mere fact that a geographic would even make that kind of concession, it means that hearing from Lady Carol Haynes, Sir Roy Trotman, Sir Henry Fraser, Senator John Watson, Sir Trevor Carmichael, has had some effect
That was
on him.
a tack-on sentence, to be quite honest, because the majority of the report was him supporting that.
Of course.
We shall see.
But we will see.
The last one before we begin
The
goes
final
on,
comment.
the union. Somebody had asked if this can impact industrial action by the union.
It could. If it's a social gathering, it can. It just depends on their view of it. There's no reason why it
They could
cannot.
take away their rights as well.
Which would, of course, affect your right to.
If a curfew is imposed, then the police have the power to shut
To end
businesses within the curfew area
Mm-hmm.
and to prohibit social activities within the curfew area.
Mm-hmm.
So that applies to everybody
Yeah.
across the board. So
So will not be
effectively,
immune from that.
the message we want to send out there is that it will not just affect one, it can affect everyone, all 285,000 of us.
It's a law that governs the entirety of Barbados and everyone who's in it.
and the geographical area upon which a curfew could be placed could theoretically be the whole island of Barbados.
Exactly.
Because they say the commissioner and the attorney general have to demarcate what is the geographical area. So theoretically, they could demarcate the entire island of Barbados for curfew.
For 2 days.
For
And then
2
two more.
days.
And then 2
And
more.
if electricity goes off, the only person that doesn't have to worry about it is Crystal. Because she brags about her solar. And her boys have
Thank you, Kevin
electricity.
Devonish.
She had electricity, but she runs off of batteries here.
Wow.
Yeah.
She's leading the way. you see.
Yes.
She's leading the way. Very good.
So, I would like to thank you, a million thanks, because this was, a lot of people are talking about this. This had my WhatsApp groups going, this had my office going. People are concerned, and I know in the back of some people's mind, they're hoping even if it does happen, it doesn't impact them directly. But even if it doesn't, you still have to be concerned. You have friends, you have family, you're going to be touched in some way. So even if you can't think about some strange person you may not know who's impacted, at least try to think about the potential impact it may have on someone you care about. And I'm grateful that you've come and shared this information with us, because as much as Wayne might push us to go and read the act, that is not easy reading. It is not. And it is difficult for persons who are not in your profession to be able to take time after a long day of work and say they're going to read through an amendment, and even if they do read it through, sometimes you may not understand the implications of everything you read. So I really do appreciate you taking your time. I know that you came straight from work, and I know you are a super busy person saving Barbados. So I really appreciate you guys coming here and taking this time. If you have any final comments, I would invite you to share.
My only comment is that this piece of legislation should never take effect in Barbados. It should not. There are many other ways that we can address these problems, and what I would invite all parties to do is to have consultation. Let us consult with each other. Let us come up with let us identify what the real challenges are and then address those challenges. Let us do that and then come up with, if legislation is what is required, let us determine what legislation that is, having had that consultation.
I would ask Barbadians to recognize that unfortunately we are saddled with a political class that instinctively believes that they have the right to think for the masses of people, to make decisions for the masses of people, and to impose edicts from on high. And that is not a proper prescription for going forward into the future. That is not a proper philosophical foundation upon which to build our democratic nations. We must not accept this. We must reject it. We must have zero tolerance for it. And let us use this opportunity to send this message to them. We must be consulted. We insist because it is our country too.
I would like to thank Liesl and Kristin and other members of this current Bar Council for becoming more engaged in issues that relate to Barbados and the rest of our citizenry. And I would commend the Bar Council, and I would encourage them to continue on this format because I was not a fan of what occurred before. I really thank you for coming this evening. I think the viewers and everyone appreciated your comments, and I would encourage you to, if you can, as soon as Liesl comes back, to at least engage the powers that be through your mechanisms, as well as maybe do a little summary for the people in Barbados, because as Crystal said, we try to read it, but there are people who don't understand the ramifications. And I think based on the comments, when you go back and you look at the comments this evening, this was an eye-opener for a lot of people. And I think it's very good of the Bar Council to come this evening and highlight the issues. David, I would like to commend you on your efforts. Had you not written what you wrote, I would not have been here. Crystal would not have received it. As soon as I saw it, I said, well, we got to talk about this. I commend you for your efforts. I applaud you for what you do. Sometimes it's a thankful job for what you do, but there are people out there that do recognize the effort that you put, and that we know that you have the interest of Barbados at heart. So we commend you for it, and in particular for this particular issue, because it has serious ramifications, not just for one community, it has serious ramifications for everyone in society. And you will have our support when there's issues like this. You can contact Crystal and I. We will try to highlight and assist you in these endeavors, because don't believe you have to do it alone. We try to encourage everyone to help, and we will do that. And I thank you and Kristin for coming this evening. We really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure.
Certainly my pleasure.
Thank you so much. And thank you to the audience for your comments, your engagement, your interaction, your sharing, your continued love. I really do appreciate it, and I wish everybody a blessed Thursday evening. Is my cameraman going to turn off the video? He finished. Come down a bit. There we go. Did he get it?